I'm Derek, 35 years of age, and 8 months prior, my marriage to Amy concluded. We were united for 3 years, and truthfully, by the conclusion, we couldn't even exist in the same space without quarreling. Every minor thing transformed into a major confrontation. What to consume for dinner became a dispute. Where to venture on the weekend became a conflict. When the divorce documents were ultimately signed, I didn't feel liberated or sorrowful. I just felt hollow and exhausted, like I'd been racing a marathon that nobody could triumph. I gathered up my belongings and discovered a small apartment in Riverside Commons, this tranquil complex on the periphery of town where nobody recognized my name or my narrative. That's precisely what I desired. I required to be somewhere I could respire without someone inquiring me how I was managing or providing me guidance I didn't request for. The apartment wasn't substantial, just 2 bedrooms and a miniature balcony, but it was mine, and mine exclusively. What I didn't comprehend when I signed the lease was who resided in the townhouse directly adjacent to mine. Amy's mother, Lillian. Yeah, you heard that correctly. My ex-wife's mom was my new neighbor. I didn't discover out until my second day there when I was transporting boxes from my vehicle and observed her emerging out of her front entrance. We both halted and stared at each other for what felt like forever. Her face went pale. My stomach plummeted to my feet. She was the initial one to speak. Derek, she stated quietly. Amy didn't inform me you'd relocated here. She doesn't recognize, I stated, shifting the heavy box in my arms. I didn't recognize you resided here either. We stood there in this peculiar silence. Lillian had always been considerate to me during the marriage, never accepting sides when Amy and I fought. She was perhaps early 50s, but appeared younger somehow, with silver streaks flowing through her brown hair that she always maintained neat. She possessed this calm manner about her that made you feel like everything would be acceptable, even when it wasn't. Well, she ultimately stated with a small smile. I suppose we're neighbors then. Inform me if you require anything. And that was it. She went back inside, and I went back to unpacking. For the initial few weeks, we barely observed each other. I'd depart early for work at the architecture firm downtown, arrive home late, and maintain to myself. She executed the same. Sometimes I'd hear her door close in the morning or observe her vehicle pull into her spot in the evening, but we didn't communicate, just quick nods if we happened to cross paths. It was awkward, but manageable. The strange thing was, even though she was Amy's mother, I didn't detest seeing her. Actually, it was kind of the opposite. There was something peaceful about knowing she was next door, like possessing a piece of calm in my chaotic life. Her townhouse was always flawless. She possessed flower boxes on her windows that bloomed with bright colors. Her patio furniture appeared like it arrived from a magazine. Everything about her space appeared organized and thought out, while my apartment was still half unpacked with boxes stacked in corners. Then arrived that Thursday morning that shifted everything. I woke up around 6:45 because I couldn't sleep. My brain was executing that thing where it replays every mistake I created with Amy, every argument, every moment I should have maintained my mouth shut but didn't. I got up and determined to water the herbs I purchased last week, these sad little plants sitting in pots on my balcony that I kept forgetting about. The sun was just commencing to arrive up, painting the sky orange and pink. I filled up an old plastic cup with water and stepped out onto the balcony. The air was cool and quiet. A few birds were chirping somewhere nearby. I commenced pouring water over the wilted basil, watching it overflow because I wasn't genuinely paying attention. That's when I glanced over at Lillian's townhouse. Her living room window was directly there, perhaps 20 feet away. The blinds were tilted open just sufficiently that I could observe inside clearly. She was standing by her kitchen counter, creating tea, wearing the silk robe that was cream-colored and elegant. Her hair was pinned up loosely with a few pieces falling around her face. She was humming something soft I couldn't recognize, moving around her space like she possessed all the time in the world. I don't comprehend why I kept watching. I should have glanced away immediately. I recognized it was incorrect to stand there staring into someone's home like some variety of creep, but something about the scene pulled me in. She appeared so at peace, so completely comfortable in her own world. There was no tension in her shoulders, no worried appearance on her face, just calm. And I hadn't felt calm in so long that I couldn't remember what it was supposed to feel like anymore. I stood there frozen, with a cup of water in my hand, permitting it overflow onto my balcony floor, soaking my shoes. My heart was beating rapidly, but I couldn't create myself rotate around and return back inside. Then she rotated her head and glanced straight at me. Our eyes locked through the glass. Time seemed to halt. My face went hot instantly. My hands commenced shaking. I desired to sprint back into my apartment and conceal under the covers like a child who acquired, caught executing something bad. But my legs wouldn't cooperate. They just maintained me standing there like an idiot. She didn't appear angry, though. She didn't appear embarrassed or scared or any of the things I anticipated. Instead, she just glanced at me with this knowing expression, like she comprehended precisely what was occurring. Then she smiled. Not a large smile, just a small one that reached her eyes. She positioned down her tea mug carefully on the counter and walked closer to the window. She glanced directly at me and stated something. I could hear it clearly through the glass, even though her voice was quiet. "Wanna look?" Then she reached up slowly and closed the blinds. I stood on that balcony for probably 5 full minutes just staring at those closed blinds. My face felt like it was on fire. My hands were trembling so much I had to position down the cup. What did that signify? Was she messing with me? Was she angry, and that was her manner of informing me to mind my own business? Or was she serious? Those three words maintained playing over and over in my head like a song stuck on repeat. Want to look? Not angry, not harsh, just calm and direct, like she was inquiring me a genuine question. I ultimately went back inside and devoted the entire day attempting to comprehend what had just occurred. The next few days were absolutely dreadful. Every time I departed my apartment, my stomach would tie itself in knots, wondering if I'd encounter into Lillian. Part of me was terrified of observing her. Part of me genuinely desired to observe her so I could clarify that I wasn't some peculiar guy who devotes his mornings glancing into people's windows. But what would I even state? Sorry I was staring at you. I'm just a chaos right now and you appeared peaceful. That sounded pathetic even in my own head. I commenced departing for work extra early and arriving home extra late just to avoid her. I peeked through my front window before opening the door to create certain the coast was clear. It was ridiculous. I felt like I was concealing from someone in my own home, but I couldn't cease thinking about her, not in a creepy manner, just in this constant wondering manner. What was she thinking? Did she inform Amy what occurred? Was she laughing about it with her friends? Every time my phone buzzed, I half anticipated it to be Amy calling to yell at me for being a creep to her mother. On the fourth day, I ultimately observed her again. I was accepting out my trash to the bins by the parking lot when I heard her door open. I froze mid-step, holding a bag of garbage like an idiot. She walked out in gardening clothes with dirt already on her knees, transporting a small towel and some plant containers. She was heading toward the community garden area where residents could cultivate vegetables. She glanced up when she heard my door close. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then she smiled like nothing peculiar had occurred at all, and waved. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" she called out. I nodded because words were stuck in my throat. She went directly back to walking toward the garden like everything was completely normal. That somehow created it worse. She was acting like she hadn't caught me staring at her through her window, like she hadn't stated those words that I couldn't cease thinking about. A whole week went by like that. Then another week, we'd observe each other outside, sometimes by the mailboxes or in the parking lot, and we'd exchange these polite hellos. She never brought up what occurred. I definitely wasn't going to bring it up, but something had altered between us, even if neither of us discussed about it. When we observed each other now, there was this peculiar energy I couldn't clarify, like we both recognized something about the other person, but nobody desired to state it out loud. I noticed other things too, like how she always smiled at me now instead of just nodding, how she'd maintain the door for me if we were both going into the building at the same time, how her eyes would meet mine for just a second longer than normal before she glanced away. Perhaps I was imagining it. Perhaps I was observing things that weren't there because I was lonely and confused, but it felt genuine. One Sunday afternoon, I was attempting to assemble together this bookshelf I'd purchased. The instructions were in about 5 different languages, and none of them created sense. I possessed pieces scattered all over my living room floor, and I was acquiring more frustrated by the minute. I'd been working on it for 2 hours and had managed to attach precisely 3 pieces together, and they were wobbly and probably incorrect. I was sitting on the floor holding a screwdriver and staring at a diagram that appeared like it was designed by someone who detested people when there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Lillian was standing there. She was wearing jeans and a simple blue sweater, and she possessed that same calm appearance on her face she always possessed. I heard banging and some cursing through the wall, she stated, attempting not to smile. "Thought you might require help." I laughed because what else could I execute? Yeah, this bookshelf is succeeding right now. She arrived inside without me genuinely inviting her, which should have been peculiar, but wasn't. She glanced at the chaos on my floor, and then at the 3 crooked pieces I'd managed to connect. "You're utilizing the incorrect screws," she stated, kneeling down adjacent to the pieces. "I'm utilizing the screws that arrived with it." "Yes, but you're utilizing the short ones where the long ones should go. Observe," she indicated at the diagram. "This symbol signifies long screws, not short ones." I felt stupid. "Oh," she picked up the screwdriver. "Here, permit me demonstrate you." She commenced accepting apart what I'd executed, clarifying as she went. Her hands moved rapidly and confidently, like she'd executed this 100 times before. Within 10 minutes, she possessed the frame of the bookshelf standing upright and stable. How'd you learn to execute this? I inquired. 22 years of marriage to a man who couldn't construct anything without acquiring angry and surrendering up, she stated. I learned to execute it myself. When she handed the screwdriver back to me, our fingers touched for just a second. Felt like a shock of electricity ran up my arm. She must have felt it too, because she pulled her hand back rapidly and stood up fast, brushing dust off her jeans. Well, she stated, her voice sounding a little different, quieter. Now you comprehend which screws go where. You should be able to finish the rest yourself. Thanks, I stated. I genuinely appreciate it. She walked toward the door, then halted and rotated around. Derek, correct? I recognize that's your name. I just signify we've never actually possessed a genuine conversation as neighbors. Yeah, I'm Derek, and you're Lillian, she smiled. I am. It's pleasant to officially meet you as a neighbor, not just as Amy's mother. There was something in the manner she stated it that created my chest feel tight, like she was drawing a line between who she was before and who she was now. Like perhaps she desired us to commence fresh and forget about all the complicated history. It's pleasant to meet you too, I stated. She departed, and I stood there in my chaotic apartment holding the screwdriver, my heart beating faster than it should have been. Something about the manner she'd stated my name, the manner she'd glanced at me when our hands touched, created my stomach flip. 2 days later, on Tuesday evening, there was another knock on my door. When I opened it, Lillian was standing there holding a plate covered with aluminum foil. I could observe steam rising from under the edges. I created too much lasagna, she stated. Thought you might desire some before I conclude up consuming it all week and detesting myself. You didn't have to execute that, I stated. But I was already opening the door wider. She shrugged. I recognize, but I executed anyway. So, are you going to invite me in, or create me stand out here like I'm marketing something? I stepped aside and permitted her in. My apartment was still kind of a chaos. I'd finished the bookshelf, but there were still unpacked boxes in the corner and dishes in the sink from breakfast. She didn't seem to care at all. She walked directly to my small kitchen table and positioned the plate down. Do you possess plates? She inquired. Yeah? I grabbed 2 plates from the cabinet and forks from the drawer. She uncovered the lasagna and it smelled incredible. We served ourselves and sat down across from each other at my little table. This is genuinely beneficial, I stated after the initial bite. It's my mother's recipe, she stated. One of the few things she taught me before she passed away. We consumed in comfortable silence for a minute. Then she commenced discussing about her garden, how she'd been attempting to cultivate tomatoes for 3 years, but something always went incorrect. Either bugs acquired them, or they rotted before they were ripe, or they just never grew at all. I follow all the instructions, she stated. I water them the correct amount, provide them plant food, everything, but they always perish. I think I'm cursed. I laughed and informed her about my job, how I'd been working on redesigning this old public library downtown for almost a year, but the project maintained acquiring delayed. Every time I thought we were finished, the city council would arrive back with new requirements or budget cuts or complaints from people who didn't desire anything to alter. It's like they're attempting to create me quit, I stated, like they don't actually desire the library fixed. They just desire to complain about it being broken. She laughed. It was a genuine laugh, not the polite variety people execute when they're just being pleasant. Sounds frustrating. We concluded of discussing for almost 2 hours about nothing important and everything at the same time. She informed me about the book she was reading, some mystery novel she couldn't position down. I informed her about the documentary I'd watched about buildings that altered cities. She didn't interrupt me or attempt to repair my problems or provide me guidance I didn't request for. She just listened, genuinely listened, like what I was stating actually mattered. When she ultimately stood up to depart, she paused at my door. You should arrive over sometime for tea, she stated. I signify my patio acquires genuinely pleasant light in the mornings. It's peaceful, beneficial place to think. I stated yes before my brain could arrive up with reasons why that was a bad concept. Over the next few weeks, those morning tea sessions on her patio became our routine. I'd wake up early, acquire dressed, and walk over to her place. She'd already possessed the kettle on and 2 cups waiting. We'd sit outside on her small love seat and watch the sun arrive up over the buildings, transforming the sky pink and orange. We discussed about everything during those mornings, books we'd read, places we desired to visit someday, memories from childhood that shaped who we became. She informed me about growing up in a small town upstate where everyone recognized everyone's business. I informed her about my father teaching me to draw building plans when I was 10 years old, how that's what created me desire to become an architect. The conversations were easy, natural, like we'd been executing this for years instead of weeks. One morning, Lillian stated something that caught me completely off guard. We were sitting on her patio like we always executed, drinking coffee and watching the sun arrive up. She appeared tired in a manner I hadn't observed before. Her eyes were red, like perhaps she'd been crying the night before. I inquired if she was acceptable, and she acquired quiet for a long time. Then she commenced discussing about her ex-husband, Richard. She informed me they were married for 22 years. 22 years of constructing a life together, raising Amy, planning for retirement. She thought everything was fine. They possessed their problems like any couple, but nothing that seemed serious. Then, about 3 years ago, Richard commenced working late more frequently. He'd arrive home after dinner, smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't hers. He halted, inquiring about her day. He'd acquire phone calls and walk into another room to answer them. When she inquired who it was, he'd state it was work stuff, and acquire annoyed that she was questioning him. Lillian stated she recognized something was incorrect, but didn't desire to believe it. She'd been with Richard since she was 28 years old. He was her whole world. The concept that he might be cheating felt impossible, so she ignored the signs. She created excuses for him. She informed herself she was being paranoid. Then, one Saturday morning, Richard sat down at their kitchen table and informed her he desired a divorce. Just like that, no warning, no explanation at initial. She inquired him why, and he stated he'd fallen in love with someone else, a woman named Jennifer from his law firm, someone 15 years younger than Lillian. He stated he'd been unhappy for years and didn't desire to waste any more time pretending. The manner Lillian described it created my chest hurt. She stated the worst part wasn't that he departed, it was that he created her feel like she'd failed somehow, like she hadn't been sufficient to maintain him interested, like all those years together signified nothing. After the divorce, Lillian threw herself into fixing up the townhouse. She repainted every room. She planted new flowers, she joined a book club, and commenced accepting yoga classes. She was attempting to determine out who she was without Richard, but it was difficult. Everywhere she glanced, she observed reminders of the life they'd constructed together. Then Amy acquired married to me. Lillian stated she was happy for us at initial. She thought perhaps possessing a son-in-law would provide her something new to concentrate on, but watching Amy and me together was painful sometimes. She'd observe us laugh at inside jokes or maintain hands while walking, and it reminded her of what she'd lost, what she thought she possessed, but genuinely didn't. When Amy and I commenced possessing problems, Lillian noticed directly away. She could hear us arguing through the walls sometimes. She stated it broke her heart because she recognized how that narrative concluded. She'd lived it herself. I sat there listening to all of this, not certain what to state. Finally, I informed her about Amy, about how we met in college and fell difficult for each other rapidly. We acquired married perhaps too rapidly before we genuinely recognized each other. The initial year was beneficial. The second year, we commenced fighting about small things that transformed into large things. Currency, stress, household drama, different concepts about the future. By the third year, we barely discussed except to argue. The day Amy informed me she desired a divorce, I felt relief mixed with failure. Relief that the fighting would halt, failure that I couldn't create it work. I relocated out 2 weeks later and discovered this apartment. The fact that it was adjacent to Lillian's place was pure coincidence. Amy didn't even recognize I resided here at initial. Lillian reached across a small table between us and positioned her hand on top of mine. Her skin was warm from holding her coffee cup. She glanced me straight in the eyes and stated something I'll never forget. She stated, "You didn't fail." She stated, "Remaining with the incorrect person doesn't create you a failure. It creates you human. Everyone desires love to work out. Everyone attempts to maintain on even when they should permit go." Something inside me broke loose when she stated that. I'd been transporting around so much guilt about the divorce, blaming myself for everything that went incorrect, replaying arguments in my head and thinking about what I could have executed differently. But sitting there with Lillian's hand on mine, I felt like perhaps I could halt punishing myself. Perhaps the divorce wasn't entirely my fault. Perhaps it was just two people who desired different things and couldn't determine out how to meet in the middle. We sat in silence for a while after that, not an awkward silence, but a comfortable one, like we both comprehended something about each other that we hadn't before. After that morning, things between us commenced feeling different, more genuine somehow, more important. I catch myself thinking about her when I was at work, sitting at my desk, staring at blueprints, but genuinely wondering what she was executing, if she was thinking about me too. I commenced executing small things around her place without her inquiring. One afternoon, I noticed her patio screen door was hanging crooked on its hinges. She wasn't home, so I grabbed my toolbox and repaired it. Another time, I observed delivery boxes stacked up by her door and transported them inside for her. She never inquired me to execute these things, but she never informed me to halt either. She commenced executing things for me too. I'd arrive home from work and discover containers of homemade soup on my doorstep with little notes attached. One note stated, "You appeared exhausted yesterday. Consume something warm." Another stated, "Don't forget your umbrella tomorrow." Large storm arriving. I hadn't been accepted care of like that in so long I'd forgotten what it felt like. It created something in my chest ache in a beneficial manner. One evening, I appeared up at her door with a bottle of red wine instead of arriving over for morning coffee. The sun was setting and her patio possessed this golden glow to it. She raised her eyebrows when she observed the wine. Attempting to alter our tradition, she inquired with a small smile. I shrugged and sat down in my usual chair. Perhaps I just desired an excuse to remain a little longer. She glanced at me for a long moment without stating anything. Something passed between us in that silence, something I couldn't name but could definitely feel. It hung in the air between us like electricity before a storm. "You don't require an excuse, Derek," she stated quietly. "You can remain as long as you desire." We drank the wine slowly. We discussed about her dream of visiting Tuscany someday, observing the rolling hills and old churches she'd read about in books. I informed her about my hope of designing something that actually mattered, something people would utilize and remember long after I was gone, not just another boring office building, but something beautiful and functional. The sky transformed dark purple and stars commenced appearing one by one. I didn't desire to depart. Sitting there with her felt more correct than anything had felt in years. When I ultimately stood up to go, I felt like I was walking away from something important, something I might regret losing. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation Lillian and I had ever possessed. The manner she smiled when she discussed about things she loved. The manner she stated my name, kind of soft and careful. The manner her hand felt on mine that morning when she informed me I hadn't failed. It wasn't just physical attraction, though I couldn't deny that was part of it. It was something larger and deeper. She created me feel observed in a manner I hadn't felt in years, like she glanced past all my broken pieces and observed something worth knowing underneath. A week went by and we fell back into our morning routine. Coffee on our patio, watching the sunrise, discussing about everything and nothing. But something had shifted after that evening with the wine. We'd sit closer than before. Our knees would contact sometimes, and neither of us would relocate away. We'd catch each other staring and then glance away rapidly, both pretending it didn't signify anything. Then, one Wednesday afternoon, dark clouds rolled in rapidly and heavy. Rain commenced arriving down so difficult I could barely observe across the parking lot. Thunder shook my windows and created the lights flicker. I was sitting on my couch reading a book when I glanced outside and observed Lillian on her covered patio. She was wrapped in a thick shawl, just sitting there on her love seat watching the rain pour down. Something about observing her out there alone created my chest feel tight, like I required to be adjacent to her. I stood at my door for perhaps 30 seconds, attempting to determine if going over there was peculiar or crossing some line. Then I determined I didn't care about lines anymore. I walked out into the rain without even grabbing a jacket. By the time I reached her covered patio, I was completely soaked. Water dripped off my hair into my eyes. My shirt stuck to my skin. I probably appeared ridiculous. She rotated and observed me standing there. Her eyes went wide. "Derek, what are you executing? You're going to catch pneumonia." I wiped rain off my face and smiled. "Then share your shawl with me." She laughed, this genuine laugh that created my heart speed up. She relocated over on the love seat and lifted one side of the shawl. I sat down adjacent to her, and she draped it over both of us. We were close sufficient that our shoulders pressed together, close sufficient that I could smell her perfume, something light and floral that created me desire to lean even closer. We didn't discuss for a while, we just sat there listening to rain hammer against the patio awning and watching lightning flash in the distance. The air smelled like wet concrete and flowers from her pots. Everything felt charged and alive. "People don't genuinely listen to rain anymore," she stated softly, almost like she was discussing to herself. "They just sprint away from it, attempt to remain dry and acquire insight as rapidly as possible. But I like it. It reminds me that some things are larger than my problems, larger than my fears." I rotated to glance at her. Rain had created her hair slightly damp where it stuck out from under the shawl. Her eyes appeared different in the stormlight, darker and more intense. "Perhaps they just require the correct person to listen with," I stated. She met my eyes and the air between us felt like it might explode, like directly before lightning strikes, and you can feel it in your teeth. Thunder rumbled somewhere distant away, but neither of us relocated. We just sat there staring at each other while the world poured rain all around us. My heart was beating so difficult I thought she might be able to hear it. I desired to kiss her so badly it hurt, but I also didn't desire to rush this, didn't desire to ruin it by moving too rapidly. When I ultimately stood up to depart, she reached out rapidly and caught my wrist. Her fingers were warm despite the cold rain. She glanced up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Nervous, perhaps hopeful, definitely. Derek, she stated, her voice barely above a whisper. I halted and rotated back to confront her, my heart in my throat. If you ever desire to glance, she whispered so quiet I almost couldn't hear it over the rain. Just inquire. My heart halted completely. Those were the same words she'd stated through her living room window all those weeks ago, but this time they signified something totally different, something more. I smiled, not because I completely comprehended what she was offering, but because for the initial time in years I desired to attempt. I desired to permit someone in again. I desired to accept that risk. I'm already glancing, I stated, not just at you, but at everything you are. How you survived acquiring your heart broken and arrived out stronger on the other side. How you're honest even when it's difficult. How you create me feel like I actually matter. She stood up and suddenly we were face to confront, still wrapped in that shawl together. Rain pounded the awning above us. Lightning flashed somewhere close and lit up her face for just a second. Then she leaned forward slowly, providing me time to pull away if I desired to. But I didn't desire to, not even a little bit. Our foreheads contacted initial, then our lips, so soft I barely felt it at initial. The kiss wasn't wild or desperate like in movies. It was gentle and careful, like we were both afraid of breaking something precious and rare. When we pulled back, neither of us stated anything. She just rested her head on my shoulder, and we stood there listening to the storm, breathing together, feeling everything shift under our feet. I don't comprehend how long we remained like that. Could have been 5 minutes or an hour. Time felt different somehow. All I recognized was that I didn't desire it to conclude, but eventually the rain commenced to slow down. The thunder relocated further away. Reality commenced creeping back in. I pulled away initial, immediately missing the warmth of her adjacent to me. I should probably go, I stated, even though it was the final thing I desired to execute. She nodded but didn't state anything, just glanced at me with those eyes that seemed to observe directly through me. I walked back to my apartment in the light drizzle that was remaining. My clothes were still soaked, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was that kiss, about what it signified, about where we went from here. The next morning, I woke up feeling like something wonderful had ultimately occurred to me after months of feeling hollow, like perhaps I could be happy again, like perhaps I deserved to be happy again. I acquired, dressed, and went outside to grab my mail from the box. That's when I observed Lillian standing by her mailbox, glancing at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not angry precisely, but not happy either, something in between that created my stomach drop like I was on a roller coaster. Hey, I stated, walking toward her, attempting to read her face. She rotated and provided me a small nod. Morning, Derek. I waited for her to state something else, to perhaps mention last night or smile the manner she usually executed, but she just stood there holding her mail, glancing everywhere except at me. Finally, I stated about last night that was. She cut me off before I could finish. We should probably just forget that occurred. Her words struck me like a punch to the stomach. I actually accepted a step back. Forget it? I inquired, my voice arriving out rougher than I signified it to. Lillian, that wasn't a mistake, at minimum not for me. I recognized it wasn't, she stated, glancing around like she was worried someone might hear us. A vehicle drove past slowly and she watched it until it vanished around the corner. But people are going to discuss, Derek. This complex is small and everyone recognizes everyone's business. And you're my ex-in-law. Do you comprehend how complicated that is? I can't handle all that directly now. It's not that I don't feel something for you. I execute. That's precisely what scares me. Before I could respond, before I could inform her I didn't care what people thought or how complicated it was, a sleek silver Mercedes pulled up to the curb directly adjacent to us. The engine purred like an expensive cat. A man acquired out wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than my rent. He was perhaps early 50s, tall with flawlessly styled gray hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes at all. I'd never observed him before in my life, but something about the manner Lillian's whole body went stiff informed me precisely who he was. Graham, she stated. Her voice sounded too polite, too careful, like she was discussing to someone dangerous. You didn't inform me you were arriving by. He smiled, but it appeared more like a threat than anything friendly. I was driving through the area and observed your vehicle. Thought I'd check in, create certain you're executing all correct, residing out here all alone. Then his eyes shifted to me. He glanced me up and down slowly, accepting in my jeans and old t-shirt and work boots. His expression created it clear what he thought of me. And who's this? He inquired, his voice dripping with false politeness. Just a neighbor, I stated, maintaining my voice steady, even though I desired to inform him to acquire back in his expensive vehicle and depart. Derek. He reached out to shake my hand, but barely contacted it, like he didn't desire to actually create contact. Graham Mitchell. I'm an old friend of Lillian's, a very close friend. The manner he stated close friend created it obvious he signified something else entirely. Days went by without us discussing. I would observe her through her living room window, sometimes reading a book or organizing things on her shelves. She would observe me too. Our eyes would meet for just a second, and then we would both glance away, rapid like we acquired caught executing something we shouldn't. I informed myself I was providing her the space she inquired for, but genuinely I just didn't comprehend what to state anymore. Every evening, I sat on my balcony alone, and the quiet felt heavier than it ever had before. On Wednesday afternoon, my coworker Brandon halted by my apartment with takeout food. He sat down across from me at my small table and stated, "You appear dreadful, man. What's going on?" Permit me guess. Woman problems. I informed him everything about Lillian, about the kiss, about Graham appearing up, and how confused I felt about all of it. Brandon listened without stating much. Then he positioned down his food and glanced at me seriously. "Derek, listen to me. You can't repair people who are still hurt from someone else. You'll just conclude up broken too. Perhaps you should permit this one go before it chaos you up." Part of me recognized he was probably correct. The intelligent thing would be to walk away, protect myself, relocate onto something easier. But then I glanced out my window and observed Lillian on her patio. She was attempting to relocate a heavy stone planter by herself, and it maintained slipping from her hands. She appeared tired and frustrated, like she was about to surrender up. Directly then, I recognized I wasn't going to listen to Brandon's guidance. I stood up from the table. Brandon glanced at me confused. "Where are you going?" "To assist my neighbor," I stated. I walked down the stairs and across to her patio. She glanced up when she heard me arriving, and for a second, I thought she might inform me to depart, but instead she just permitted out a long breath, like she'd been holding it in for days. "This stupid planter is too heavy," she stated quietly. "I can't acquire it where I desire it." "Permit me assist," I stated. We worked together to relocate it to the other side of her patio. Our hands contacted a few times as we lifted and pushed. Neither of us stated anything, but I could feel all the things we weren't stating pressing down on us. When we ultimately acquired the planter in place, she rotated off the water hose and we both just stood there. "I concluded things with Graham," she stated suddenly, glancing down at the wet concrete, "for beneficial this time. I called him yesterday and informed him to halt arriving around. Informed him to halt acting like he possesses any correct to inform me how to reside my life." I glanced at her, attempting to read her face. "Are you acceptable?" She smiled, but it appeared small and tired. "Not genuinely, but I will be. I just couldn't maintain permitting fear create all my choices anymore. I was so scared of people discussing, so scared of acquiring hurt again, that I was about to push away the initial beneficial thing that's occurred to me in years." She paused and glanced up at me. Her eyes were wet, even though she wasn't crying. "Derek, I've lost people before. I comprehend what it's like to construct walls around yourself so thick that nothing can acquire through. You inform yourself you're being intelligent, protecting yourself. But the problem with walls is they maintain out all the beneficial things too. They maintain out the light." I reached for her hand and she permitted me accept it. Her fingers felt cold in mine. "Then perhaps it's time to open the windows," I stated quietly. She glanced at me for a long moment, her eyes searching my face like she was attempting to remember every detail. Then she squeezed my hand tight. "You're too patient with me," she stated. "Most people would have walked away by now. Perhaps I ultimately discovered something worth being patient for," I stated. She stepped closer and wrapped her arms around me. I held her while she cried softly into my shoulder. Not sad crying precisely, but the variety of crying that occurs when you ultimately permit go of something heavy you've been transporting for too long. "I'm tired of being afraid," she whispered. "I'm tired of caring what everyone thinks. I just desire to be happy." "Then be happy," I stated, halt inquiring for permission. We stood there like that for a while, just holding each other while the sun commenced going down behind the buildings. I could hear children playing somewhere in the complex. Someone was cooking dinner, and the smell drifted out from an open window. Everything felt normal and peaceful. When she ultimately pulled back, she wiped her eyes and laughed a little. "I probably appear dreadful directly now." "You appear flawless," I stated, and I signified it. That evening, I sat on my balcony like I always executed, but something felt different. The light between our units was on, glowing warm in the growing darkness. I didn't comprehend if Lillian rotated it on for me or if it was just her regular routine. But when I glanced over at her patio, she was sitting there too. She possessed a cup of tea in her hands. And when our eyes met across the space between us, she didn't glance away this time. She just provided me a small smile that created my chest feel tight. "Storm's over," I called out to her. She nodded slowly for now anyway. I stood up and walked down my stairs, across the grass and up to her patio. She relocated over on the love seat to create room for me, and I sat down beside her. We didn't discuss for a while. The air smelled like fresh rain from earlier and cut grass and something else I couldn't name, something that felt like possibility. Finally, she stated, "Thank you for not surrendering up on me." I attempted to, I admitted. It didn't function. She laughed and it sounded different than before. Lighter, like perhaps she was commencing to trust herself again, like perhaps she was prepared to permit someone in without being so afraid of what might occur. "What altered?" she inquired. I thought about it for a moment. I realized that being alone and secure isn't superior than being with you and scared. I'd rather accept the risk. She reached over and accepted my hand, lacing our fingers together. Me too. We sat there together as the sky acquired darker and stars commenced arriving out one by one. Someone's TV was playing softly from an apartment nearby. A vehicle drove past slowly. Everything felt normal and simple and correct. "What occurs now?" I inquired. "I don't comprehend," she stated honestly, "but I guess we determine it out together." I squeezed her hand. "I can execute that." She leaned her head on my shoulder and we watched the night settle in around us. For the initial time in months, I wasn't worried about tomorrow or next week or next month. I was just there in that moment with her, and that felt like sufficient. Spring arrived slowly to Riverside Commons. Trees that had been bare all winter commenced acquiring their leaves back. Flowers pushed up through dirt in the community garden beds. The air acquired warmer, and everything felt new, like the whole world was waking up from a long sleep. Lillian and I fell into a routine that felt easy and natural. We didn't position a label on what we were executing. We didn't possess large discussions about where this was going. We just devoted time together, and it functioned. Most mornings, we concluded up on one patio or the other with our coffee, discussing about small things. She would inform me about a recipe she observed online that she desired to attempt. I would complain about my boss or inform her about something funny that occurred at work. It sounds boring when I state it like that, but it wasn't. After everything we'd been through, normal felt like a gift we both earned. One Saturday morning, she was working in the small garden area near her patio, pulling weeds and trimming plants. I walked over to assist without her inquiring. "You're here early," she stated without glancing up from her work. "Couldn't sleep," I stated. "Birds were too loud." She smiled. "That's what occurs when you select peace, Derek. It arrives with bird songs." We worked together for hours that day. We planted new herbs where old ones had perished over the winter. We repaired the little fence around her garden that had arrived loose. We drank lemonade when we acquired tired and sat in the grass discussing about nothing important. Felt simple, and that's precisely what created it special. That afternoon, the Carmichael couple from Building C was possessing a large party for their retirement. They'd invited the whole complex. Lillian and I walked over together. I observed people watching us, some smiling, others whispering to each other behind their hands. I didn't care anymore. Lillian didn't either. She wore a simple yellow sundress and possessed her hair pulled back with a clip. She appeared beautiful, but in a manner that seemed natural, like she wasn't attempting to impress anyone. She was just comfortable being herself. People had positioned up tables in the courtyard with food and drinks. Someone had hung string lights even though it was still daytime. Music played from speakers near the pool area. After we'd been there about an hour, people commenced dancing on the grass. I stood to the side watching, feeling awkward. Lillian arrived up adjacent to me. "What's incorrect?" she inquired. "I don't genuinely comprehend how to dance," I stated. She held out her hand to me. "You informed me once. You didn't comprehend how to love someone again either, but you determined it out one step at a time. Remember?" I accepted her hand and permitted her lead me onto the grass with the other couples. We didn't genuinely dance, just swayed back and forth slowly to the music. She rested her head against my chest, and I could smell her shampoo, something floral and clean. People were laughing and discussing all around us, but it felt distant away, like we were in our own little world. "People are definitely staring at us," I stated quietly. "I recognize," she whispered back. "Permit them stare. I'm finished concealing from being happy." When the song concluded, some people clapped. A few smiled at us. Others just watched with curious faces, probably wondering about the narrative behind us. Mrs. Patterson from Building B provided us a thumbs up and a large smile. Mr. Chun nodded at me with respect. Lillian glanced up at me with that same calm expression she'd provided me the very initial day through her living room window, the one that had commenced all of this. The next week, I discovered her sitting on her patio with a small notebook, writing something down. "What are you working on?" I inquired, sitting down adjacent to her. "Nothing genuinely," she stated. "Just thinking about things, about how love isn't supposed to feel like acquiring struck by lightning." "What's it supposed to feel like then?" I inquired. She thought about it for a moment, her pen hovering over the page. Rain, she stated ultimately, steady and quiet. Sometimes it's annoying and you wish it would halt, but it's what creates everything cultivate. It's what brings life. I accepted her hand in mine and laced our fingers together. I guess we created it through the storm then. She leaned her head on my shoulder. We didn't just create it through, she stated softly. We learned how to dance in it. Later that evening, we sat together on her patio watching the sun go down. It painted the sky orange and pink and purple, colors so bright they almost didn't appear genuine. I caught her glancing at me instead of the sunset. What? I inquired, smiling. You still glance at me like you can't believe this is genuine, she stated. I can't believe it, I admitted. But I halted, pretending I don't desire it to be. She laughed quietly. You're impossible, you comprehend that. Perhaps, I stated, but you're still here. She relocated closer and positioned her hand on my chest where she could feel my heartbeat. When you initial relocated an adjacent door, I thought you were just another lonely man attempting to repair things around his apartment to maintain busy, to distract himself from whatever he was sprinting from. But somewhere along the matter, you commenced repairing things in me too. The parts I thought were too broken to function anymore. We sat there together as the sky acquired darker and stars commenced appearing. No thunder, no rain, no drama, just two people who had halted sprinting away from what scared them. As the initial stars arrived out, I rotated to glance at her. Lillian, I stated quietly. I never stated thank you. For what? She inquired. For that initial morning when you caught me glancing through your window. Her laugh was low and warm, the variety of laugh that creates you feel secure. If you desire to glance, she whispered, leaning close to me, just inquire. I smiled and kissed her. This time, there was no hesitation, no worry about what people would think, no fear about acquiring hurt, just a simple kiss that felt like closing one chapter and opening another. When we pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine. You comprehend, people in this complex are still going to discuss about us. Permit them discuss, I stated. They don't comprehend the variety of love that's quiet anyway. Directly then, tiny drops of rain commenced falling. Not a storm, just a gentle spring rain. We remained directly where we were, not sprinting inside, just listening to it tap against the patio cover. 7 months later, on a Tuesday morning that felt just like the one where this all commenced, I inquired Lillian to marry me on that same patio where we'd shared so many quiet moments. The sun was arriving up behind the buildings, and birds were singing, and everything felt correct. She stated yes without hesitation, tears running down her face. And we held each other as the world woke up around us. We acquired married 2 months after that in the community garden with just a few close friends and neighbors watching. It was small and simple and flawless. Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears. Mr. Chun provided me a firm handshake and stated I was fortunate. The Carmichael couple brought champagne. What I learned from Lillian was that genuine love isn't about flawless timing or ideal situations. It's about appearing up every day and selecting someone even when things acquire chaotic. The relationships that last aren't constructed only on excitement and passion. They're constructed on quiet mornings and patient waiting and the willingness to stand in the rain together. 6 months after the wedding, we purchased a house together on the other side of town. We packed up our apartments at Riverside Commons and relocated into a place that was ours, not his or hers, but genuinely ours. It possessed a large porch in the back and a garden that required work and rooms we could fill with memories. Now every morning still commences the same manner. Tea on our porch, her hand in mine, watching the world wake up around us. Sometimes we discuss, sometimes we just sit in comfortable silence. Either manner, it's flawless. We discovered something most people devote their whole lives searching for, not because we were searching for it, but because we were courageous sufficient to permit it discover us, because we selected to open the windows instead of maintaining them closed. Because we learned that sometimes the optimal things in life arrive from the people you minimum anticipate in moments you never planned. And every single day, I'm grateful I was watering those plants that morning. Grateful she caught me glancing. Grateful she smiled instead of being angry. Grateful for every quiet moment that led us here. That's what love genuinely is. Not the large dramatic moments you observe in movies. It's the small things, the daily selecting, the patient comprehending, the willingness to be scared together and trust that somehow it'll all function out. And with Lillian, it did.